Hi, friends. Today we have my good friend Kurston Clark, aka Benevolent Birth, on the podcast. We have a very candid conversation about the importance of taking full responsibility of your pregnancy journey and birth, the illusion of safety, and how to mindfully choose your birth support if you desire it. So often women outsource for their birth because that's what society tells you have to do. And it seems to be the safest option to most people. However, this is simply an illusion because at the end of the day, even the most experienced care provider cannot guarantee the outcome of your birth. Not only that, but oftentimes the people we invite into our birth space end up interfering in a way that disturbs birth. Choosing who steps into this sacred space is so important. I hope this episode resonates with you today.
Are you giving too much power to your provider, to your birth team, whoever it is that you choose to have present at your birth, supporting you in whichever way, whether it's a doula, whether it's a birth keeper, whether it's a midwife, or even an OB? Are you giving them too much power? And what does that even mean, right? Like, what does it mean to give your power away in birth, and what does that look like? And we're going to chat about that because it's a very nuanced topic. There's so much to it. But as a birth worker, I feel like this is probably one of the most important conversations to have. Because we're basically told in society that we have to outsource for birth, right? Like it's not the status quo or like the go-to way to birth. It's not unassisted. That's like still pretty underground. Like, although in our world it's very normal, it's not normal to the rest of the world. So it's really typical to like get pregnant and go find a provider, whether you choose an OB, whether you choose a midwife, or even a birth keeper or a doula, like whoever is there to support you. And I think a really important question to ask yourself is, what are you outsourcing for? Right? And I know you can speak on this because you have a really unique story, Kurston, but like when you got pregnant with Henry, you chose not to hire an OB or a midwife, but you did choose to hire a doula. And I just want you to speak on that a little bit. Like, what were you looking for in hiring your doula? And then why did you end up telling her not to come to the birth? Like, what did you discover along your journey that made you change your mind in that and take?
Right. Yeah. And if y'all want to go and listen to my birth story, it's on the Birth and Rebirth podcast. Y'all can go and listen to it. But in general, I was looking for my mom. Not even joking. I was looking for a motherly figure to be present at my birth. That's actually what I said when I interviewed my doula. I was crying and I was telling her how I didn't have a relationship with my mom right now, and I just wanted a woman to be there and to be present for me. I wasn't even planning a home birth necessarily at that time. Uh, not an assisted birth for sure. I just knew that I wanted a motherly presence at my birth. And the farther I got into my pregnancy and the more I educated myself about birth and physiological birth, I kept feeling like she actually wasn't even supposed to be there. She was a great lady and very cool and was down to attend my unassisted birth, but I just kept feeling like she wasn't the right energy, the right presence to have in the room. So yeah, as far as like outsourcing my authority, I just knew she wasn't my mom. She wasn't
Mm,
my mom. I only have one mom, and we have a unique relationship, and it wouldn't have worked out for her to be at my birth. I'm not even sure if she can be at my future birth because she is a nurse and she has a very medical background. So that that was my experience though, and I had a very normal, almost kind of like boring unassisted birth at home. I just like had my baby in my bathroom. Like there really wasn't a lot of fuss, and that's what I tell people when I meet people like in real life, and I tell them, but it's so true. Like when you say women, when they get pregnant, they immediately, the first thing they do is they go to the doctor and they confirm their pregnancy with an ultrasound. And then the doctor's like, all right, here are all the tests. Or even women who might not go to the OB, they'll go to a midwife. And the midwife will be like, all right, well, here are all the tests that you can or cannot take. Um, and I think it's understandable and valid for women to want support. They want to know that their health is good and that their baby's health is good. But when you outsource to a certain degree, you are giving your authority away, and it can just bring in so much
mhm.
unnecessary drama into your pregnancy and into your birth. And women just women just don't know. Women are so, I think that's what surprised me so much when I was pregnant and I was learning about birth because of how I was planning on giving birth. I knew that I really kind of needed to know what was happening in my logical mind before I went into the physiological experience to feel like truly like, okay, I kind of know what's going on. But women are not educated on birth, they're not educated on their own bodies. I had a
Yeah.
friend who, when I was pregnant, I was talking about delivering the placenta, and she didn't know what the placenta was.
Oh my
And it
goodness.
was, yeah, I mean, but that's normal. That's normal
Yeah.
nowadays. So with that, it makes sense that women go to someone like the authority, the one who
The
knows more,
expert.
the expert, who knows more about birth and about how her body works than she does. And that's where the imbalance comes in. Is,
Yeah,
she's looking at that other person when really the birth happens through her.
exactly.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
I love that. It's so true though. Like it's because of the way that our society just lacks so much in education in general, but like real like physiological birth is not even discussed at all. Like most OBs don't even understand physiological birth, which is wild because, like, aren't you the quote unquote expert? Um, so, like you said, it makes a lot of sense to want and to desire support, especially from another woman. And I know I totally experienced that when I got pregnant with my daughter. Like, I knew about unassisted birth. I knew about free birth. I desired that. I remember like years before even conceiving my daughter, envisioning that I would choose an unassisted birth. But once I got pregnant and once I started to like deal with all of the things that I started to deal with in my pregnancy, which I won't go into the details, but you can listen to the birth story in an earlier episode. I really wanted support, like not just support from my husband, but from a woman who was wise in the realm of
yeah,
birth. And so I went to a midwife thinking that's what I would get. And in my experience, and I think in many women's experiences, at least from what I've witnessed as a birth worker, the second you hire that person, it's like the weight of the responsibility is kind of like lifted. Like, okay, well, I got my midwife, like she got me, she got my back. And then you get a doula on top of that, and now you feel super equipped. You're like, I got the midwife, I got the doula, like I'm good. Some people even get two doulas. Like, I think that, there's this thinking like the more supported I am, and I almost want to like air quote the support, because I don't believe that all midwives truly like come from that place, because it is a job at the end of the day. And like, we have to be realistic about that too. Like, this is what these people do daily. And bring in the licensure on top of that. It's like there's lots of things that make that a sticky situation. It's not your mom attending your birth.
Yeah.
It's not your sister, your wise sister attending your birth. It's someone you hired to come at and be at your birth. And so that's something too that I feel like gets really foggy, is that people really build these connections with these women thinking like they got me no matter what. And so naturally you kind of just don't take on the responsibility anymore, because it's been handed over to the person you hired. And that to me is like the danger zone, right? Is like handing over the responsibility, because at the end of the day, it's your birth. Like Kurston said, your baby is coming through you, not through the midwife, not through the doula. And also, what about your doula not making it, your midwife not making it? I mean, these things happen. You know, so many different scenarios can take place that you literally couldn't even like foresee. And if you've handed over the responsibility and the power to someone else who was hired to do this, perform a job, or it's like you're not preparing the same way you would prepare if you were having an unassisted birth. And I get it.
Yeah.
Unassisted birthing is not for everyone, and that's okay. I'm not, saying that's the only way. You can hire people to support you, but also prepare as if you're having a free birth. And
Yeah.
that's totally possible too. But I feel like the that's not the standard way of thinking, at least in my own experience as a birth worker, and just through my own experience with birth. I mean, it was only 2.5 years ago that I chose to hand over everything to my midwife and was like, whew, okay, don't got to think about that anymore, just wait for baby to come now. And everything, I mean, almost everything didn't go as I expected it to go. And I found myself in a place where I was really regretting like giving so much of the authority away, because it came and kind of slapped me in the face, in a time where it was so not ideal. I mean, I was in labor when I realized that. And like, who wants to be processing all of this while they're in labor? Like, no
Yeah.
one. It's not even realistic. So yeah, I just really wanted to unpack that with Kurston, because I feel like as birth workers, this is our responsibility to really like share these things, because unless you're, fully immersed in birth work, or, have this commitment to understanding this world, there is a lot of smoke and mirrors. There's a
Yeah.
lot of deception, there's a lot of confusion. I mean, I don't blame, women who do things that way, where they just hand over the authority. And I mean, it's what we're told to do,
Yeah.
and you don't know what you don't know. So that's why I wanted to, put this episode out, because hopefully it lands on the ears of women who need this message, that you are the authority. You should be the authority in your birth space, period.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I also think it's true that women are told it's better and easier for them to just go with the flow. What and that means whatever your midwife wants to do, whatever your OB wants to do, whether that be monitoring, cervical checks, give you a dose of Pitocin, you should just go with that because, again, they're the expert. They know more than you. They care about your health and your safety, and they're recommending those things because they care. When actually that's just what they're trained to do. They're
Hmm.
trained to administer medications. They're trained to check you. They're trained to monitor you. And that's another reason why I ended up not getting a midwife, because I knew ahead of time that I didn't want cervical checks. And I actually didn't even want someone there who was trained in cervical checks, because I didn't even want to waste an ounce of energy saying, no, thank you. I just wanted to remove that completely. But women are not always at that place. When women get pregnant and they're going into their births, they're often very nervous, they're very scared. They have the birth stories that they were told all throughout their life growing up that were complete horror stories. And, oh, I'm just so thankful that my doctor was able to save my life, emergency C-sections and all these things. That is the programming that they grow up with and that they go into their pregnancies and births with. So it makes sense that that is where they're acting from. It's really up to the woman what experience she wants to have, and I think that can be really hard for some women to accept and um I don't know, like acknowledge that they have the power to choose what their birth experience is going to be. They don't have to just go with the flow. They don't
Yeah.
have to just allow their midwife or doctor to do whatever to them. They can say no, or they can choose to go, a completely unbeaten path from what everybody else in their life has done, or all their mother and their grandmother have done.
Yeah.
That's hard to do because then you're the odd one out. I i i almost feel bad like saying it sometimes, because I'm like, yeah, like but that was my choice, and women just don't realize that they have a
That's right.
choice.
Yeah.
And I think too, something that's very prevalent in like the birth world with unassisted birth versus whatever birth of assisted birth is you're going to be blamed if something bad were to happen.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
also that's why you should go with the flow. That's why you should hire the midwife. That's why you should give birth in the hospital, because if something bad were to happen to you or your baby, you would be blamed, and
Hmm.
you know, you would never be able to live that down. So of course, you should just go with the flow, and whatever they tell you to do, just do it because you don't want to die and you don't want your baby to die. Like that is the bigger conversation as to why women are outsourcing their
Yeah.
authority, is because they don't want to be responsible
Yeah, they don't.
for.
Yeah.
Yeah, and but that
Because
makes
it's
it makes
scary. I
sense because
mean, yeah,
it's heavy and it's
it's
intense.
heavy. It's a
Yeah.
heavy responsibility, but I mean, the reality is that that's what comes with being pregnant. The truth is that you're never the whole, safety thing is an illusion. Like, death can happen anywhere. Things can go wrong in birth in any kind of setting. Like, these things happen in hospitals where people think they're safest giving birth. And a lot of times it's done because of whatever intervention and, nonsense is, whatever whatever way they're augmenting birth, like typically that's why these things happen. But of course, yes, stillbirth is a thing. Like sometimes, I mean, it's God's will, right? No one knows. There's no doctor you can hire, no midwife you can hire, no anyone that can tell you what you and your baby's fate is. But you brought up the topic of birth trauma, and that is and it's something I talk about a lot, partly because I experienced it myself, but really, honestly, what motivated me to start talking about birth trauma more than anything is supporting women in the system, like supporting women giving birth in the system, because that was traumatizing. And witnessing other women's birth trauma as their doula, who is supposed to be advocating for them and supporting them, that's an illusion too, by the way. There's nothing that your doula can do to supersede your OB.
Yeah.
That is the reality. And that is something that people don't talk about enough. But this whole doula thing in the system, at least, like in the hospital setting, in the birthing center, it's really silly to say that you are going to be able to advocate for this mom when in reality you can advocate for her and then get threatened to get kicked out of the hospital by
Right.
the
Yeah.
OB, which
Well,
has
as far
happened to
as
me many times.
well, as far as authority goes in a hospital room, there is the OB,
Uh-huh.
the doula or the dad or whoever, the support person who isn't a medically trained professional, and then there's the mom. So
The
that's
nurse
the
is on top of the
hierarchy.
doula.
Oh, the nurse. Shoot, I forgot about the nurse girl.
Yeah.
See, so there's just so much that as a doula that you are working against. And at the end, it's like, well, my hands are tied because I'm not the medical professional. I'm not the one in charge. You go into their territory and you do your best to advocate for your client and for the women that you're serving, but there's only so much that you can do.
Yeah.
And the woman's probably going to be like, well, but the doctor, he, this is it's about
He
my life.
knows
So
better. Yeah.
yeah, so if this is what they need to do, then that's what we should do because I don't want to die and I don't want my baby to die. And
Yeah.
that's just the truth of the matter. And I also want to say that a lot of women aren't unhappy with their experience because they have that, like, well, I didn't die and my baby didn't die, so it's okay. So it's all right. It's only when I think it takes a certain matter of self-reflection to really look back and be like, maybe it didn't have to be that way. Or, like allow yourself to kind of feel unhappy with how things went when you're also weighing it against the life or death thing. Like it's again, that's why this is such a tricky and nuanced conversation because it's also very emotionally charged. Women become so emotional talking about their births because it's I mean I just can't imagine watching a woman go through what a woman commonly goes through in the hospital, even with just having monitors on and getting cervical checks. Like that makes my skin crawl for me personally.
And that's like
And
the
so
least
that's
of it.
I know, and that's why I know as a birth worker and someone who loves birth, I could never authentically attend a woman and be her support person in a hospital birth setting. Like I'm just not the person for that
Yeah.
because I see how the authority moves and I see how things are interfering with her experience. So and that's why I'm like, I can love on mamas afterwards. I will, and that's what I do in my in-person community. I'm not working as a birth worker right now, but I do everything I can to make meals for women and go and love on them. But yeah, just the birth room is a completely different territory.
No, it is. And
So
I could honestly speak on this topic for hours because honestly, I feel like there's just so much to unpack in my very short amount of time, like serving women in the system. I know people who do it for much longer, and honestly, I don't understand how, because it's such clear abuse. But going back to the birth trauma piece of that is that I feel like when you are the authority in your birth space, the chances of having birth trauma is close to none, unless you had like maybe a really intense precipitous birth and your body went into like shock. I know that I've heard stories like that,
yeah,
and I don't want to, you know, like discredit those experiences or minimize them. Like I know that that could be some form of trauma for women, but it's a lot easier to unpack and understand something that's physiological, um and sort of come to a place of like understanding and peace around that versus having something done to you against
right.
your, against your will, and so on and so forth. And that is what is so often taking place in settings like hospital births and birthing centers. I mean, I honestly put those two things together, and I also add in inviting a midwife to your home. Many, many women have been violated in their own homes, which
Yeah,
that is like I think it's even, I don't want to say one thing is worse than the other because honestly, that's not true at all. But when you invite someone into your home, there's this false sense of like, I'm safe here because this is my house. But if you're inviting a midwife into your home who you've given all of your power to, and you've given her the authority in your space, I'm sorry, but she is now in control. And
yeah,
the second her fear is triggered, or the second she's worried about losing her license because she's
come on, yeah,
uncomfortable with what's happening in the room, your wishes go out the window. And that's a really unfortunate truth, but this is the reality. And that's something that I was blindsided by because I chose to have a home birth with a midwife, and I thought I was protected because I was home and not in the hospital. And I mean, I couldn't have been more, you know, uh confused about what was actually going to end up happening in my birth experience, and more, caught off guard. Um so that is really like some of the consequences of what handing over, your power and outsourcing in birth, what that could look like. And you can still choose support, and you can still choose support and have the take on all of that responsibility and have the authority in the birth space, but that requires a lot of education. That requires a lot of speaking up for yourself and advocating for yourself. And this
yeah,
is something that
yeah,
that I tell my clients that I work with. I don't lead them to think that I'm going to be their protector, because I know that's not true. I know that's not possible. I cannot possibly have that kind of power in a room with OBs and nurses who run the show in the hospital. And here I am saying, she said she doesn't want her water broken, and then I'm getting pulled out the room and threatened to get kicked out. I mean, what am I going to do? I have no power there. Like, it would be really like deceptive and cruel for me to allow a client of mine to think that I have that kind of control and power. I don't.
Yeah.
I'm just a doula. Like,
And that's what's so hard for me with the hospital birth conversation is the woman doesn't even have power. She
mhm.
I think women have to go through so many extra steps to remind the nurses and the doctors that she is in fact the one giving birth and she does have the right to say no and to decline things. You have to be so ready to fight these providers because they will say just about anything to convince you to do what they want you to do. And that's why it's so hard for me with the hospital birth conversation because
Yep.
I mean, you can go in saying, I have the authority, I have the right to say no, this, that, and the other thing. But what are the consequences? I hear, stories of women facing CPS for declining things like the vitamin K shot
Yep.
or the Hep B shot. So that's why I'm not a free birth purist. I'm not an unassisted birth purist. You can birth really however you want to, but you should do yourself the favor of really, really educating yourself on where you're birthing and who you're birthing with so that you can make the right choices
Yeah.
as far as like what birth experience you want to have. And again, I think that women so often will they will validate their birth trauma and the experience they had with their survival of birth and their baby's survival. And I think that's why this conversation is so hard, right? Because it's like, well, I had to. I had to so that me and my baby could survive. Um, and that's what makes this so hard. Uh, but but it's also true that women can have really really incredible birth experiences and not have the trauma and not have this like after they have their baby this feeling of like I feel like that it didn't have to go that way. That's also an option, but so commonly I think the common woman doesn't even know that that is an option. So that's why we like to have this conversation and why we
Yeah.
like to say like you do have a choice. You do have a choice who you invite. You do have a choice where you birth, and you also have the choice and I think the responsibility to educate yourself on hospital birth practices, like what they're going to do to you, the things that they're going to offer you, the side effects, and how your body works. I think that that is so, so important to do if you want to have a positive birth experience.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Amen to that. I do believe that the hospital birth scenario is a tricky one, but I also understand that some women literally don't feel safe birthing outside of a
Of course,
hospital.
yeah. Yeah.
And I think that the key is not, don't expect to have a physiological birth. Like, realistically speaking, it's really just not possible. But you can choose to have the authority in the space, but know you're going to fight for it. Know that you're going to have to fight for it. And that experience is probably not going to be pleasant. And I think if you're going to choose a hospital birth, it's more important, honestly, than any other setting. I mean, hospital birth, birthing center, pulled into that category. It's couldn't be more as essential, honestly, to hold the power and to
Yeah.
hold the authority in the room, because it is so much more likely for things to spiral out of control in a setting like that, where you are not prepared, where you are, going with the flow. You should never go with the flow when someone else is responsible for your life and your baby's life. And, it could sound overwhelming to have to, learn all of these things and inform yourself in such a way. But no, there are other options if you don't want to have to inform yourself about hospital policy and, what your rights are and how to navigate CPS if that, you know, if that unfortunately happens to you when you decline XYZ. Like, I understand that that's a hard path to choose to take, and you don't have to take it if you don't want to. If it doesn't sound pleasant to you, there are certainly other options. And I think that there's no right or wrong, really. It's whatever is right for you and your
Right.
family. But the key is to take all of the responsibility, to have all of the authority, and be 100% informed. And really, yeah, that's the message. Kirsten, do you have anything else that you want to add?
No, I think the only thing is it's not just where women feel safe, but it's where they feel comfortable. I think like we've said before, safety is kind of a bit of an illusion, but comfort isn't. So if you are
Mhm.
more comfortable with the idea of birthing in a hospital, that's valid. And I know women who have had hospital birth experiences and they love their hospital birth experience, and that's real. And then there are women who feel more comfortable birthing at home, but they still don't feel comfortable birthing at home by themselves, right? So it's, yeah, of course, birth wherever you feel comfortable, but like Tiffany said, just take responsibility and know that you do have the authority over your birth, and you have a choice. No matter where you are or who you're birthing with, you have a choice to say yes or no, and just know that and own it. It's not Nobody gives you that power. You already have the power because you are the birthing woman. It's not about having someone there to empower you. It's about having people there
Mhm.
to encourage you. So, yeah, that's all I
Yeah.
have to say. Yeah.
Amen. Amen. I hope that this lands and that the message is received the way it was intended. I know that this is a really hard topic to speak on, because I never want to induce any kind of shame or guilt or anything like that. I truly feel like like we just said, whatever if is right to you, like, so be it. This is your life, right? We're literally just messengers of, of this, because this is our work. Like, this is what we do and love. And we love women, and we want women to have better birth experiences. And,
Yeah.
we really hope that we maybe in 10 or 20 years we see like big radical shifts in the birth space. um but it starts with like each of our stories,
Yeah.
like each of our experiences and births. And birth is such a beautiful sacred thing, and you deserve to have it exactly the way that you want it. So we love you guys.
All right. Love you.
Bye bye.
Bye.